We have protections in place to protect staff and the President of the United States. COVID isn't over. We've been very clear about that. Hundreds of Americans are dying every day, and cases are increasing right now, today.
White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre there from the White House saying that the COVID pandemic is not over. That happened earlier this week. That despite President Biden himself saying at least twice that the pandemic is over. It comes as one member of the House Republican caucus introducing legislation that would officially declare the pandemic is over once and for all. Congressman Brett Guthrie, a Kentucky Republican, sponsor of the Pandemic is Over Act. Congressman, thanks for coming on.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Good morning to you. I know a lot of viewers want to hear what you have to say. Your bill would do exactly what the title says. Plain and simple, a bill to terminate the public health emergency declared with respect to COVID-19. It's set to end in April, but as you know, as I do, it continues to be extended. So why now? Why do you want to end this as soon as possible?
Well, exactly as you said, there's still cases of COVID, but the president has said the emergency pandemic is over. And so what we need to do is to change and stop the emergency powers of the executive branch. And I'll talk about why that's important. It's set to expire in April, but it's already extended 12 times. So we expect the president will extend it again because they've done, as far as we can tell, no work to prepare to end the pandemic. So let me just kind of lay out a little bit what's important. It is important to have emergency powers when we have these types of situations. President Trump used the emergency order in order to have the Defense Production Act to make sure we had respirators, to move ship out of, and people forget how well he responded to COVID-19 by moving, a hospital ship outside of New York. There are a lot of things that need to happen when there's actual pandemic. But now we can't govern for 3 years under emergency order. Congress is here. So why don't we do it now? Because there's a new majority in the House of Representatives. We're going to exert our authority because we think the Constitution requires it. So what is President Biden doing with this emergency pandemic now order? He's using the fact that there's an emergency order to invoke other statutes to do things such as forgive student debt, which has nothing related to the pandemic at all. So it's time to get back to regular order and time for Congress to exert its authority. And we're doing it now because we're now in the majority and we have the ability to do so. Unfortunately, my Democrat colleagues just ceded legislative authority to the president, and people on both sides of the aisle in the legislative branches say, hey, we're responsible to the people for Article I powers in the Constitution, and we need to exercise them.
Yeah, in terms of the emergency powers, which obviously for viewers watching right now, they've made their own decisions about the pandemic and how to handle it with their own family members. But how the government operates is essentially what your bill is going after here. But you think about the broad message that this White House is sending. You remember this. President Biden had to talk to Scott Pelley on CBS back in September. He was asked about the pandemic. Here's that moment.
The pandemic is over. We still have a problem with COVID. We're still doing a lot of work on it. But the pandemic is over.
Again, twice there on record with 60 Minutes, and then you have the press secretary coming out saying completely different, something different. For those maybe that don't educate themselves or don't watch different news networks, don't read different news outlets, perhaps they believe that from the White House, that they are still in the midst of a pandemic.
Well, the president absolutely said it. And even if we were still in the middle of a pandemic, even if you accept that, the president should not be able to operate under emergency powers for almost 3 years. The presidency spanning 2 presidents. One president used it correctly to move things in the right place, dealing directly with the pandemic, emergency use authorization for therapies, Defense Production Act for respirators. That's a far cry for using the fact that there's still an emergency in place to put forth a legislative agenda that has nothing to do with the pandemic, that couldn't get through Congress, and that's the forgiving student debt's a great example of that. And so we have to bring back our legislative authority in so many different ways. Congress has ceded its authority, has given its authority to the executive branch in so many different ways. But I'll tell you, this majority under Speaker Kevin McCarthy is dedicated to making sure we have the checks and balances that people expect. And the number one thing is even if we have to react, which there are things we still need to react to, It should be an act of Congress, not just by executive order. And that's what we're trying to push forward.
And yeah, to be very clear, COVID-19 is out there. Dr. Fauci and others have said it's not going anywhere. But the fact when I say the pandemic being over, people are back to work, people are back to schools, normal life is back again to normal. You have your
We've got to get back
out.
to normal is the point. Absolutely.
Exactly. Right. All right. Congressman Brett Guthrie joining us live. Thank you so much. We appreciate that.